Hi, my name is Tyler. I'm one of the mentors at ReadyEdgeGo. I work on essay editing, and I'm here today to talk to you about majoring in creative writing. So I majored in creative writing when I was an undergrad. I went to UC San Diego, and I got my BA in literature writing. And basically, what that entailed was I took some writing courses for my upper division to reach my major requirement, but the path that I took was really up to me. UC San Diego has a couple of different paths that you can take with more of a focus on creative writing or more of a focus on non-creative writing types such as journalism or marketing, anything that isn't a fictional story. And for me, I started out writing when I was little. Before I could even really spell, I was writing. I would write little stories on tiny scraps of paper and hide them throughout the house. And I always loved to read too. And I never even realized how much reading built into the desire to be a writer. And as far as I can tell, some people have a hard time kind of figuring out what's for them. For me, I was always very fortunate in that I've always known that I wanted to write. So I think my story might be a little bit unique in that way. But for you, if you're trying to weigh the positives and negatives of different majors, I hope today I'll be able to help you parse out what might make a difference to you by sharing a little bit more about my story. So when making the decision to major in creative writing, I was actually weighing the possibility between majoring in creative writing and political science as a double major. The reason being that I thought I might one day become a speech writer for the president. That is not an aspiration of mine anymore, but if it is for you, I would 100% support that dream. But in the end, I ended up only majoring in writing. And for me, my experience with majoring in writing at a major four-year university, in some degrees, I think might have been unique for the time. So my major was impacted, meaning that there were more people who were in the major than they had spaces for in class. And one day I kind of got a little bit frustrated and I walked into the advising office for the literature department and I talked to my advisor and I said, hey, if I took some classes over in the theater department in playwriting, would I be able to apply to use that toward my major? And that was approved. So I started taking playwriting classes, which was a medium that I had never experimented in before. And I really found kind of my passion and my groove where writing's concerned. And I just want to take a moment to pause and say something that I think is really important for aspiring writers to hear, which is that you want to find the people who believe in you. And so for me, this person in particular was the head of the playwriting program at UC San Diego. His name is Alan Havis. I wrote a play, and one of his TAs passed the play along to him. And he reached out to me and he said, hey, I think you might actually be very good at this. Um, and to a certain degree, that is because I was in class and I had to share my writing. But also, it's really about finding that courage, I guess, to take that step and share your writing with other people and be vulnerable in that way. So that's something that I learned while I was getting my degree as well. And that's kind of an integral part of being a writer. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. Um, so I ended up taking my skill set from UC San Diego and applying to different programs to get my MFA in dramatic writing. And what an MFA in dramatic writing is it's a kind of a combination of different types of creative writing, mostly with the aim of writing scripts. So that's plays, screenplays, television scripts. And I got into USC and I went to USC. And while I was at USC, I furthered my writing skills by practicing writing plays, screenplays, and academic research papers. And so once I graduated, it was kind of like a now what, right? And I think that at some point, like unless you're, dead set on becoming, like you majored in economics and now you're going to be an accountant. Some degrees kind of carry with them that now what question. What do I do with this in the practical real world? And sometimes the answer might not be so obvious. When I graduated with both of my degrees, the first job that I took had nothing to do with writing. I was in an accounts receivable department until I could find that first job. And that first job, that first writing job where I was really able to apply my skills outside of higher education, was working for a textbook company as an editor. Now I want to transition to a certain set of questions that I think might help you mull over some of the things that I weighed when I was a student pursuing a writing degree. So my first question that sometimes I typically get from students who are interested in this degree is, what can I even do with a writing degree? So I kind of encourage you to think about it this way. What's your favorite commercial, TV show, or movie? What's your favorite video game? How do you get your news? What do you learn in your textbooks? How do you read a website, right? Think about Instagram captions or TikTok posts from major corporations. Who writes those captions? The answer is people who write. Those are writers. Those are all done through writing. Every single way that we interact with our world to some degree has that component of writing attached to it. So the answer is pretty much you can work anywhere. And I will say this too. One of the things that I've noticed being a writer in today's world is that there are so many more avenues for writers today than there were 10 years ago when I first got my degree. So the demand is very high right now. And I think it's a good time to be a writer. One of the other questions I tend to get is, what is the difference between creative writing and other types of writing? Well, I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but it really just depends for you on what your interest is. So some universities may offer courses in one or other, or the other, or both. So creative writing being stories, novels, plays, poetry, screenwriting, and non-creative being things like journalism, editorial writing, marketing, academic writing, social media, all of those other things. And like I said, writing, like any other skill, is something that you build. So that's a decision and a path that you need to take for yourself. Another question I get is, what is the benefit of earning a creative writing degree? So I will say that in terms of creative writing, all writing has elements of what you learn as a creative writer, right? How to tell a story, how to express yourself clearly, how to include important details and eliminate confusing or unnecessary information. And it also includes persuasive writing skills. And I would say for me, my favorite thing about being a creative writer, working in a world where I don't always utilize that skill for my job, is that I feel like I have more leeway to break the rules. And what I mean by that is that typically when you are learning how to write outside of the creative writing discipline, there are a lot of rules that you have to follow. And the ability to stretch those rules isn't very flexible. And so you don't get to exercise some of those muscles that you might get to exercise in creative writing. So you have more leeway to break the rules and get a little bit creative, and it gives you a unique skill set that other people might not necessarily have for some of those jobs that you're looking at applying to. So what can I do career-wise? I kind of referred to this earlier, but specifically, I do want to say that companies are looking for people who can communicate. And different types of careers, especially today, that are in high demand are things like UX writing. So that's like the microcopy that you see on websites, the errors that you get of somewhere if you click on a page and it doesn't land somewhere, the suggestions and text box when you're filling out a form. Those all take experienced writers to be able to build those types of platforms, because the way that we interact with our world has so much to do with language, and your ability to manipulate and to understand how to use that language effectively is going to be such a strong tool that sets you apart. There's also editorial writing. So that's things like magazines or sometimes certain websites, blog posts, or anything that might be a little bit more long form and professional. There's technical writing, which a lot of companies have in high demand. So if you're the kind of person who, like me, was thinking maybe I should double major and you really love writing and you really love science, technical writing might be a very nice career. One of my best friends, she was a chemistry major, but she minored in lit writing and she also worked at that textbook company. She wrote a lot of the science text for the chemistry books and a couple of the other science programs as well. So that gave her a little bit of a niche skill that other people didn't have, because sometimes what might end up happening is if you're going into a scientific field and you don't really exercise that writing muscle as much after those initial college courses that kind of teach you how to write, you lose that like ability to effectively communicate. So keeping both of those in lockstep as you're building your technical skill and your writing skill creates a job market for you where you would be in high demand. And then there's also other types of writing like marketing, social media. Many children these days are kind of growing up with social media constantly surrounding them, and they're sort of becoming naturals at advertising and figuring out how to brand themselves in a way. And so I would say too that marketing is a really natural fit for younger generations as well. So kind of walking through that, you're asking yourself, maybe, what can I do to prepare? So my first piece of advice is to research what degree programs have to offer by way of writing. These might fall under communications, journalism, English. Different schools might have different programs and types of classes as well. So take a look at their catalog of classes. Ask yourself, who are the faculty that are teaching writing at this institution? Look them up, read some of their work. It's so important to want to learn from the people who are teaching you. If you're engaged, you're more likely to care about the material and your progress. Even if your writing vibes don't necessarily gel, ask yourself if they're doing something interesting that makes you curious or inspires you. And practice. I cannot begin to tell you enough how important regular, consistent practice is toward building your writing skills. Now, I will say that most universities will likely have some basic writing classes, and the intention of those classes is to teach you how to write at the university level, but that doesn't mean that you can't start practicing other kinds of writing now. And with that being said, those are my key tips. And if you have any questions, I'm always happy to be a resource. You can reach me at Tyler@ReadyEdgeGo. And I hope that you're excited about the potential of exploring this as a future career.